Welcome back to Wordy Wednesday. As you can see, I have company for the first time in several days. Audie, yeah, I know, but you have to be quiet. Audie has decided he's going to visit with us, remind us that he's actually the star of these videos. Today, we are going to talk about the second 5 chapters, chapters 6 through 10, of A Confederacy of Dunces, and we're going to take a look at some of the scholarly opinions on this work. So, when we get back. A Confederacy of Dunces is what is called a picaresque novel. I'll write that out for you. This word comes from Italian, and the root is Piccaro, who was a sort of roguish protagonist of a work of fiction, and it's been applied to subsequent novels wherein the hero is a person whose general worldview, to borrow from Ignatius, is very much in conflict, not only with our own worldview, but with a worldview that most of us would consider good, right, moral. Ignatius obviously is a person of great intelligence and a lot of education, but a very peculiar and narrow-minded view of life. His worldview was established by the 6th century philosopher Boethius, and I think I mentioned in a previous video that Boethius is considered by many to be Christian, not by me. I do not consider Boethius's works to be Christian, and quite frankly, I am at a loss to explain how anyone else could, because concepts like the goddess Fortuna and the wheel of fortune sort of bringing you up and bringing you down in cycles is diametrically opposed to fundamental Christian philosophy. Boethius was a Roman, and at his time, which, as I say, was 6th century, the Roman Empire was Christianized. It was a weird sort of accretionist, pagan-influenced Christianity, not what we would think of when we think of medieval Christianity. This is the early Dark Ages, a period far enough back in time so that information and official ecclesiastical points of view were not fully formed. In any event, Boethius had a view of a cyclical fate controlling one's life, the wheel of fortune, the goddess Fortuna. So one has to assume, at least I think, that Boethius's Christianity was a nominal Christianity. In order to achieve a position in government, which was his birthright, he was from the patrician class, he was going to be part of the leadership of his society. In order to achieve those positions, he would have to be at least nominally Christian. It is my personal belief, I'm not alone in this, that was about the extent of his Christianity. Just sort of the, oh well, in order to hold this office, I have to say I'm a Christian, so I'm going to do it. Okay. So Ignatius Riley, who is living in very Catholic New Orleans, and we see this throughout the book. He was raised within the Catholic Church. His mother is a Catholic. He was educated in the parochial school system early in his life. And we see that over and over again when Claude Robichaud speaks about his grandchildren being educated by the sisters. This is normal, or was at least normal, in New Orleans. So when we look at the character through the eyes of educated literary critics, we are looking at a character who, as I say, has an alternate worldview. That's about as kind as one can be. Usually the heroes of a picaresque novel are rascals and rapscallions. They say that the classic in English literature is Huckleberry Finn, and who was living outside of society, really. So the other comment that is most often made about a Confederacy of Dunces is the brilliance of John Kennedy Toole's I dialect. Write that for you too. I dialect is when the spoken dialogue of characters is written phonetically as they would have said it. So, and we have words in our common speech that are recognized by the Microsoft and Google spell checkers that came to us from iDialect. For example, wanna. If you type in wanna, W-A-N-N-A, instead of want to, the spell checker recognizes it. Wanna is an example of iDialect, as is gonna, G-O-N-N-A, instead of going to. So the dialect, this New Orleans dialect that he was reproducing, was considered exemplary by scholars. I have to say that I'm inclined to agree, because when you read the words, you find yourself falling into the dialect that he is offering up. Whether you've ever heard it or not, you start speaking like a native of New Orleans just because of the way he is writing the words. And that's, as I said, it's one of the major praises you hear of this work. So, I think there's more to it than that in terms of why the book resonated. For one thing, it was published in 1980 or 81. That would have been 17 years after it was written. It was written in 1963. I have always maintained that had it been published in the 60s, as it should have been, it would have been the anthem of our generation. It would have been another Catcher in the Rye. It just would have instantly resonated with the generation of young people of the 60s. His beatnik, Myrna Minkov, would have been immediately translated in our minds as, a 60s rabble-rouser. His efforts to organize the blacks and the gays would have been something that we all could have related to. So in that sense, it was ahead of its time. When it came out, it strongly resonated with people of my generation, in large part because of this. And it was a cult classic. To this day, the book is not as widely recognized as it should be, but in intellectual circles, it's just Ignatius Riley is a byword, for a certain type of individual who is rather anachronistic in their thinking and, rather anachronistic in their thinking. Let's leave it at that. Well, when we get into the second set of 5 chapters, we start to see some changes in the book. For one thing, we start to see the interconnectedness of our characters. We had encountered them all as individuals and unrelated individuals in the beginning of the book. Ignatius is accosted by Officer Mancuso. Officer Mancuso later convinces Ignatius's mother to go out bowling with his aunt Santa Battaglia, who becomes his mother's close friend. And with the emotional support of having a close and trusted friend, Irene Riley starts to assert herself, and she begins to just look at what's going on in her life, primarily her relationship with her son. She begins to articulate her dissatisfaction with the relationship and with Ignatius. And the more she articulates her dissatisfaction, the more clear she becomes in her own mind that the relationship is dysfunctional. Now, she doesn't use that word, and we can't expect her to, because dysfunctional was not a word that was used in 1963, and Irene has no education to speak of, so that's not what she would call it. Nevertheless, she's starting to realize that all is not as it should be, and she is making efforts to get Ignatius to bring his behavior a little more into line with society. Now, Burma Jones, who is another of our major characters, has been brought in to the book early on. Remember, we meet him when he is in jail with Claude Robichaud. They've done time together. And he is released on the condition that he go out and find a job. Otherwise, they're going to pick him up for vagrancy again. So he has gotten a job at the Night of Joy, and this is the bar that Ignatius and his mother stopped into in our very first chapter. And he's a street sweeper, but he begins to become aware that something strange is going on at the bar. The bar owner's alleged activities on behalf of the orphans is seeming inherently suspicious to him, and he's starting to try to unravel this little mystery, and it's becoming important to him. He's going to find out. So we're starting to mesh, and the various independent players are starting to cross paths. As we progress to this point in the book, Ignatius has gotten a job at Levi Pants, or Levy Pants, or Levy Pants. I'm going to say that because they are in Louisiana, they would have called it Levy Pants, but the name is pronounced differently in different parts of the country. In the Northeast, you're much more likely to hear it pronounced Levy, and in the West, you're much more likely to hear it pronounced Levi. So I'm going to defer to Levy because that seems to me to be the most common pronunciation in the South. And unfortunately, I have no way of knowing which pronunciation was in John Kennedy Toole's mind when he wrote the book. So Levy Pants has hired him. He organizes the African-American workers in the factory into what was his crusade for Moorish dignity. Some bizarre highfalutin name that I am quite sure had no meaning whatsoever for the factory workers he was organizing, but somehow in his own mind, it elevated them. Oh, this is this whole white man's burden thing. So that hasn't worked out. They will not kill Gonzalez, the office manager. Ignatius is disappointed and fired and needs a new job and becomes a hot dog vendor, much to his mother's chagrin, because she finds this just utterly socially unacceptable. And keep in mind, this is a lower class woman with very little education. She is only marginally literate, as we learn. So, yeah, if it's beneath her dignity, it's pretty low. And of course, she has the support of her friends, Asanta and Mr. Robichaux, who is coming to court her. And she's beginning to articulate her discontent more and more freely to Ignatius. In the meantime, Dorian Green has come back into the picture. Dorian, in case there was any doubt in our mind when we first encountered him, is gay, and he is apparently one of the social leaders of the gay community in his section of New Orleans. He throws the best parties, and everybody just gets wasted, and when they're passed out on the floor the next morning, that's what he considers to be a sterling bash. So we have these all sort of floating around. The connections are becoming clear, and as the book continues, they will become more so. Mostly what we are seeing is this sort of tour de force of John Kennedy Toole expressing Ignatius's bizarre contempt for just about every aspect of modern life, as none of it has any proper geometry or theology, stuff that he's pulled directly from Boethius. We're also seeing more and more that what he is doing is intended to impress his chaste love, Myrna Minkoff, off in New York, who is doing things herself, which she expects will impress Ignatius. In this section, we get to see more of Gus Levy's wife, and Mrs. Levy has taken a correspondence course in psychology and flunked it so badly they won't even give her an F. They just ran from her, and she's psychoanalyzing everybody and attempting to rehabilitate the aged bookkeeper or account clerk. I think she's an account clerk from Levy Pants, Miss Trixie, which becomes a little better developed as the book progresses. Miss Trixie is clearly suffering from dementia. She's very elderly, does not want to be working anymore, would like to be retired, but she is sort of the social project Mrs. Levy has taken on. So that's where we are. And this is where the book is at its height of entertaining, when John Kennedy Toole takes these archetypal characters, the spoiled, bored housewife, the rich sort of Peter Panish, overgrown child of a husband who'd rather be off at the racetrack or the golf course. It is sort of one stereotype after another, and he just goes to town on them. All right, now let me just make a suggestion, because it looks like in 2 weeks we will be finished with this and we'll be ready to move on to another book. So, in the absence of any other suggestions, allow me to suggest this. Oh, here, let me move my hand so you can see it. Good Omens. This is a book that was written by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. Neil Gaiman's special sort of focus tends to be on religious or quasi-religious issues. And Terry Pratchett was very successful in the field of writing works geared at a younger audience, not a children's audience, but sort of a young adult audience. And they collaborated on this book. It was turned into a very, very highly rated television miniseries, which I would recommend if you want to go download something for good watching. That particular miniseries, same title, Good Omens, was just a delight. Well, this is the book. So if you're interested in this, let me know. If you are not, and you have another contender you'd like to throw in the ring, please, by all means, do so, because I would love to hear what you are interested in. I've chosen this book as our tentative offering because we've done early 19th century literature with Jane Austen. We did something from the 1960s. We are doing something from the 1960s with the Confederacy of Dunces. Maybe we'd like to do something more modern. So give it some thought. Let me know in the comments what you think of this and what direction you would like to see us go in. So let's continue with the Confederacy of Dunces, and I will see you all Friday morning when we're going to get back to our sort of regular videos, and book club, of course, Thursday nights, 8 o'clock. If you haven't read Confederacy of Dunces and you want to, I will make sure I reprint that link. I'll do this in a pinned comment. You can download a PDF copy of the book. All right, so I will see you all later. Have a very, very happy Thanksgiving.